Hey everybody, it's Buzz Patterson. Thank you for joining our town hall tonight, this evening. It's been a while. Glad to have you guys back again. If you don't know, I'm running for California 7, Sacramento County, and we're going to do a town hall tonight. I'm very privileged to introduce Kevin Mickelson. He's been working for the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department since 1994. I think he did a couple of years in corrections. He did 11 years on the beat, and since 2007, he's been the president of the Sacramento County Sheriff's Deputy Sheriff's Association. So, Kevin, welcome to the show tonight. We've got a lot to talk about. Thank you so much for joining us.
There I am.
Hey, Kevin, welcome aboard, man. It's so great to meet you. Great to talk to you. We got a lot to talk about. So, I really respect your career so far. Your service to our Sheriff's Association in Sacramento. And I want to talk about what's been going on the last few months in terms of law enforcement. And as a military guy, I get it. I hold you guys close to my heart as well. But what can you tell me in terms of what it means to serve in uniform, to wear the badge and be a sheriff in Sac County, and how that affects you personally and also the families of those who work for you?
Well, thanks for having me. So I guess to start off, it's kind of corny, but everybody says it. You know, we do this job because it's a calling. It's no different than a missionary or a pastor, right?
Right.
It's a calling. We're all drawn to it for one reason or another. Everybody absolutely we love our jobs. What really starts grating on us, and it's a minority, but when the minority has the majority of the media time and the bully pulpit, I guess is the way of saying it, it just really kills morale when that's all you hear. So for the last 2 or 3 months, we've just been hearing how bad cops are, how racist cops are, the systemic racism in law enforcement. And it wears you down when, you know, we're not hearing about the 99.5% of the good things that law enforcement officers are out there doing each and every day. We're hearing about the 0.5% or the 0.2%. And somehow we just have to figure out how to spin that narrative around and get everything back on track.
So talking about, we talked about a couple of days on the phone, we talked about the actual numbers, and people would be surprised.
Yes.
When people think about, you know, the Black Lives Matter, and when people try to frame, and of course Black lives do matter, but when people try to frame the systemic racism in law enforcement, when they try to frame systemic racism in our country, in reality, the numbers, 5, 10, in terms of white on black violence. I mean, you know, being a military guy and having been in combat, you know, no innocent life is acceptable, right? But
Correct.
When you talk about the fog of war, the fact that you guys have split seconds to make it sometimes not even a second. You know, you've got to react in a moment's notice without knowing if that other person has the ability to kill you, and you won't be able to go home to your family, your wife and kids. So tell me what that feels like on the ground for a cop, because I can tell you what it feels like for an Air Force pilot. I've been shot at, but tell me what that feels like when you're actually on the ground, on the beat in Sacramento County, and you've got to make that decision. And it's not black or white, it's gray.
Well, what people need to realize is that every encounter could be a life-threatening encounter. So law enforcement officers are hyper-vigilant on every call. We don't know until that call is over that there was going to be a good resolution, right? It's any and every call could be a life-threatening call. That's probably why sometimes we get a bad rap for being short-tempered or being, you know, curt, being short with people. You know, we're busy kind of running through everything that's going through our mind and watching everything that's coming out of every corner. And we always can't be as polite as we can be, which is probably one of the things we really need to work on in law enforcement, is that end of it. But, you know, that's an education process, you know, that we should educate the public, right? If they knew why we did our jobs and why we're doing and saying what we're doing, I think they would probably understand us a little better.
So can you describe like a typical day, Kevin? Can you describe like, I mean, I guess like probably most days are mundane and boring, but there's always the days or the nights that you have that you've got to be hyper vigilant, and then also all of a sudden you know the you're it goes from 0 to 60 really really quick. So what's a typical day like, and what's a really bad day like?
Well, I think that's why a lot of us like doing this job, because there really is no typical day, right? You don't know. Every call is different. You could be, you said going from 0 to 60. Well, I say it's going to 0 to Mach 1.
Yeah.
And I've said this before in the past. You know, 80% of the time we probably get overpaid for what we do. 15% of the time we're probably paid right in there in the sweet spot, and 5% of the time there's no amount of money in the world that you can pay me to do the job that we do. So I mean, you can go from, you know, a runaway, a child runaway call, right, at the beginning of your shift, and be 9:40 to, you know, you're meeting with your partner to discuss that call or to clear the call, and immediately there's a shooting, and you're going code 3 to a shooting. It's just, there is no typical day. They're just not carbon copies of one another. Every single day is different.
And what kind of what are the shifts like for the average guy and girl on the street? What's a typical shift like, and what are they thinking? I mean, I guess trying to, you know, again, I'm a military guy, so I'm trying to get into your heart. What's a typical day like in terms of showing up, you know, putting on the belt, putting on the badge? Is it 12 hours? Do you guys, what's a day like?
Well, for us in patrol, they're 10-hour shifts unless you work at the airport. The airport's a 12-hour shift model. You come, you get dressed, you have briefing. Usually you hit the field within 30 minutes or 45 minutes of your shift start time.
Okay.
And the dispatchers just start sending you calls. And unfortunately for us right now, you know, we went through a severe layoff and rollbacks back in 2009 when we had that whole economic crisis back then. And you know, we're probably working with 100 officers less out on the street right now than what we were, you know, 10, 11, 12 years ago. So it's call to call right now. It's call to call pretty much all night, all day, every day. There's very little downtime.
Can I
Very
just
little.
a little tangent there? So with what's happening right now with Gavin Newsom's rollback on, I guess there's some, you know, budget cuts coming up, not only for you guys, but also for hospital professionals. Are you guys looking at being, I mean, I know we can get into this in a little bit, but I know that the whole defunding the police thing, and if you're in Minneapolis, it's reimagining law enforcement. But what are you guys looking at, guys and girls, looking at in terms of actual budget cuts, and how's that going to affect your ability to do your job, do your mission every single day?
So oddly enough, in 2009, the Deputy Sheriff's Association, we actually went to the county with our Law Enforcement Managers Association and said, hey, we think that we have a budget problem. And they didn't think that there was a problem back then. So we're supposed to have a budget, you know, a proposed budget in June for Sacramento County. They've kind of foregone having the June budget, and they're going to wait until September, hoping that there's federal money coming from, you know, from the federal government to bail everybody out of this COVID crisis.
Right.
So I would be remiss if I didn't say I'm thinking about it. I think a lot of my people are thinking about it. Everybody that's been here since 2009 or prior to 2009, we've all lived it. It feels the same. So hopefully we do get federal money. if we get the federal money, I think we'll be all right. If we don't get the federal money, then I think everything is going to be on the table again.
So you're not facing layoffs or furloughs currently?
No, we are not. We are not.
Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit, Kevin, and talk about President Trump and the Republicans put out they tried to put out a bill a couple of days ago that talks about, police enforcement or law enforcement restrictions like chokeholds, those kind of things. And I think President Trump's the supporter of the fact that maybe we don't need those unless the officer's life or his well-being is in jeopardy, or her well-being is in jeopardy. What do you think about limiting the tactics that you guys and girls are currently able to use?
So what we're referring to is the carotid control hold.
Right. Yeah.
It's not the stranglehold as our governor depicted it and called it. It's not a chokehold. So let's just be clear. If I am in a life-threatening situation, or my partner's in a life-threatening situation, or I'm at your house and you're in a life-threatening situation with a suspect, a law enforcement officer can use whatever means necessary to help me, help my partner, help you save our lives. So you can put into a law, you can put into legislation that I can't do this or I can't do that. If it's a life-threatening situation, I can already use a carotid control hold. So that's bottom line.
Yeah.
So, but what people don't understand is the carotid control hold is, it's a it's a lower level of force. It could cause death if you're in a life or death situation and you choose to use a carotid control hold rather than your firearm. Yeah, it could cause death. But there are many, many instances where you can use the carotid control hold after you've used your pepper spray, or you've used your baton, or you've used the taser, and all of them are ineffective. And I can tell you a story about where that exact same thing happened. Well, if I've used everything else and I have the only tool left on my belt is my gun, and I can't use the carotid control hold because I'm in fear of great bodily injury or somebody else's great bodily injury to somebody else, you've now taken a tool away from me.
Right.
And I think it's just an education process. We've got an assembly bill here, 1196 in California, where they're trying to eliminate the use of the carotid control hold. I'm hoping that we can educate our legislators so that we can still use it in the instances of great bodily injury and or death.
So you're talking about we would be eliminating a step down in terms of force. In terms if you eliminate the carotid chokehold, you would be eliminating something that I think Ray's putting something up there. Yeah, so that's what it is. But so Kevin, you're talking about if we eliminate that legally, our officers are going to have less choices in terms of how to respond to force.
Yes, that's exactly the point. You're taking,
and also,
you think of it as a tool belt, right? You're taking a Phillips screwdriver off of my tool belt. So once that's gone, now I've got to use a standard screwdriver, to do a job that it wasn't meant to do.
Yeah, which leads me to my next question, and I think I understand where you're going to go with this too, and I feel the same way. So a lot of the Democrats are talking about reducing or eliminating qualified immunity, which means that police officers could be sued for excessive use of force. And I can't imagine being a police officer or a sheriff and having going into a situation where it's either I get sued or I don't follow up on a call.
Yeah.
It's like if you're an airline pilot, we're protected by certain things as a pilot. And I can't imagine that if I didn't have those protections, I would ever fly into bad weather. I would ever fly into a small airport. I would ever do anything that might jeopardize my career or your career. So I'm guessing qualified immunity. I mean, to me, I understand why it's there, and I can't believe we would take that tool out of your belt either.
So, our legislators and in some instances our voters, they vote laws into place, and it places a huge responsibility. Law enforcement officers have a huge responsibility in enforcing the laws that either the state legislators or our federal legislators or our citizens have voted in. So when we are out enforcing what the citizenry wants us to do, somebody breaks the law where we are effecting an arrest, we are allowed to use the reasonable amount of force necessary to effect that arrest.
Right.
So as long as we are acting reasonably within the law, within the amount of force necessary, within our department's general orders and operations orders, if somebody were to get hurt, we need to have the immunity from civil, liability.
Right. Right.
As long as we're acting reasonably. Nobody is saying if we are acting recklessly or outside of the law, right, that should be covered. Nobody is saying that. And I think that there's already been officers who have been sued civilly when they've acted outside the law and when they've acted outside of their departmental orders and operations orders.
So what happens to good law enforcement and civil conduct when we don't have officers with the ability to do something with immunity? I mean, I could see this. I mean, we're watching it go down in Seattle right now with Chaz or Chop or whatever. I can see this going down the road where we're going to restrict your ability to enforce the law because nobody else wants to. Our officers don't want to enforce the law, right? They're so concerned about what might happen to them civilly or in court, so that when they get a call about a domestic dispute in downtown Sacramento or in Elk Grove, they don't want to respond to that because they might incur liability in terms of how to respond to that. I mean, I'm saying again, this is a layman's question, but
no, you're saying it perfectly.
Yeah, I'm guessing why would you respond to that call if you knew that there was a prospect that if you got involved and had to pull your weapon, you might get sued for that, and not only would you lose your career, you might lose your home, your family. I mean, I don't know how that would work. I mean, it all goes back to the whole defunding the police and reimagining law enforcement thing. I don't know that people really get that this republic, this nation is founded on the ability, the rule of law. And if we don't have you guys enforcing the rule of law, we don't have the republic or the nation. I mean, to me, it's common sense. But I mean, I don't know.
Honestly, I don't think I can say it any better than you just said it. Why would I arrest anybody? All right. If I'm inadvertently, break somebody's arm, sprain somebody's wrist to where they can turn right around and sue me, I think officers are not going to do those types of things. But I think that's what they want. And the simple term is it's anarchy, right? You look at what's going on at CHOP or Chaz. And the ironic thing is they kicked the police out of there. But what was one of the first things they did? They armed themselves and they had their own little police force. Well, who do they answer to? What general orders do they answer to? What laws do they answer to? I mean, it's just, they put up a border wall and they, had their own, leader.
And they can't. I mean, I really felt for the police, the head of the police department in Seattle, because she was appealing, hey, I want to go in there and help. I'm not allowed to because the mayor's an idiot. And I just can't imagine how that would be. And I guess, so my next question, Kevin, is what can we do for you? What can I, as your new congressman in CA7, what can I and the folks who live in CA7 do for you? What can we understand? What do you need us to know? Educate me about what you guys and girls need. I probably have a pretty good idea, but I want you to tell me, straight and to the point. What do you need from me as your future congressman, and what can we do for you?
So the mantra going around right now is the defund the police, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we've been defunding the police for the last decade by piling jobs on us that we were never meant to do. And I'll give a couple of examples. In 2009, when we had our layoffs and rollbacks, we cut the mental health facility out of the county of Sacramento. We have nowhere to take these people, to where now they're not getting any treatment. Those people then become homeless, and that's why, in my opinion, that's why our homeless population is exploding, because we're not treating our mentally ill. So rather than defunding the police, let's fund these institutions, homeless outreach, mental health outreach, and so that the professionals, the practitioners in those areas can start taking care of them, and they're not flooding our streets. I think that, President Trump and our federal government had a pretty good idea by, hey, we're going to give you federal money if we team up these healthcare practitioners, the mental health practitioners, the homeless practitioners, team them up in patrol cars. We already do that in Sacramento County. We've got mental health practitioners that ride around with deputies, and anytime a mental health call pops up, that officer with that mental health practitioner, they go handle that call. We have homeless outreach teams, but they're out there doing the best they can. We had Volunteers of America here in Sacramento County, where we could take somebody who was always chronically drunk. We could take them to the Volunteers of America, and they knew them by name. They're frequent flyers. A lot of these homeless, a dozen years ago, a lot of our homeless drunks and our mentally ill, they were frequent flyers. We could get them off the streets. We knew where to take them. Those practitioners at those locations knew them. They knew the medication. They knew the help they needed. They knew family members. They knew who to call. They took them off the streets for a month, 6 months, 9 months, until they, slid back into their ways. But at least then they knew how to deal with them, and it wasn't just the revolving door like it is now. So
what's changed, Kevin, since then? So I'm a big, the homeless issue really hurts my heart, because I know a lot of fellow vets are on the streets. So what I know Gavin Newsom likes to call it a affordable housing crisis. I don't believe that's true. So what do you think really is the heart, and how do we address that?
I think that you need to fund the homeless outreach programs. For us in Sacramento County, it was Volunteers of America. They had, I think, a 70-bed facility right over here by where my office is now. And then our mental health treatment facility, we could drop people off at either one of those two locations. And the practitioners there could get them the help that they needed. They could get them sobered up, or they could get them back onto their psych meds. And then they could get them, a lot of these people, they can get plugged back into their families, right?
Right.
And then their families can help them. And then if they backslide a month later, 6 months later, or 9 months later, then so be it. But we know, hey, you know them by first name. You pick them up and you take them back to one place or the other. And I think that's why our streets are so flooded with the homeless right now.
And it's increased, right? So you've seen
Oh yeah.
In the last,
I moved out of Sacramento County because of the homeless issue. Ultimately.
Really? So
yeah. Yeah.
And it's increasing. It's yeah, and I feel for you, and I see that every single day, and I get it, and I just wish we could do more about that. And I think you're right. I think it's. I didn't know that you guys actually had mental health professionals riding around on patrol. I think that's brilliant. I think we need a lot more of that.
I think that the Sacramento Sheriff's Office is probably not the only, but one of only a few that do that.
Yeah, I think that's amazing, and I know that Sacramento County has the highest homeless family rate in the nation, which that means it's not just the occasional man or woman, but it's also the kids. It's the family, and I think it's a tragedy also.
Yeah.
So, what would you say? I mean, I know that the reputation of law enforcement, a lot like the reputation of a lot of institutions across the country in the last 6 or 9 months, has taken a hit. What would you say? This troubles me too. What would you say to the people who are demeaning what you do and what your people do? And how would you appeal to the voters in Sac County, the voters in District 7, I mean, I get it, but how would you talk to somebody who just does not make the connection between what you guys do and what the average citizen in Sacramento County?
Well, there's always going to be that percentage of people that demean us. There's always going to be a percentage of the population that just doesn't like law enforcement. I mean, I went on patrol. There were people who taught their kids to hate cops. So
Yeah.
there's not really a whole lot we can do about that. But I think the one thing that we do poorly in law enforcement, so it's an education process on both halves, right? People have to be willing to be educated, and we have to be willing to educate. And there's some programs out there that we can put people through. I'll give them a plug. The Why'd You Stop Me program, WYSM, out of Sergeant Lehman in Long Beach started. He teaches middle school, primarily middle school children. It's an 8-hour course, and it teaches children why police officers, cops do what they do. Why do they say what they say? I think the vast majority of people, even law enforcement still polls in the high 70s or low 80s
Right.
for approval ratings. But even those people who approve of law enforcement, I think the vast majority of them don't understand what we do or why we do what we do. I think that's what we need to do better. I think that we just need to, we need to educate, and then we need to be willing to be educated also, in return.
Yeah. So I would totally agree with that. So I would say, what could we do in terms of law enforcement to educate the people, and what can we change in terms of our education for our folks? And then what can we do for our folks to learn more about the law enforcement? I mean, because I travel around, I speak on college campuses across the country, and one of the things that I always run into is that today the average, there's less than 1% of the U.S. population right now that has anybody in the military or has family members in the military.
Mhm.
So we're looking at 99.2% folks who've never been in the military, don't understand the military. So I try to travel around and try to educate people about why the military exists, why we've been here. So what would you say? How can we influence Sacramento County, Kevin, that we can we get into the high schools? Is that where we start? The elementary school?
I think that's exactly where we need to get. So you have the CHP have this program, the every 15 minutes program about, DUI training, right? And teaching our high schoolers about, what happens when you drive under the influence of alcohol or drugs. And right, I think all of our kids go through that. I don't know that some parents may not know that. Every high schooler gets the every 15 minutes program.
Yep.
Why can't we have that same program for teaching our middle school children? It's mainly geared for that age 12, 13, 14-year-old student. Why can't we have every kid in the nation for one day during their middle school years to teach them why law enforcement officers do what they do, say what they do? Everybody does it. I do it even now when I'm driving and I see, 2 or 3 or 4 cars. I look over what are they doing, right? We're just curious. We're creatures. We're curious.
Right.
I know after I see what they're doing, I know what they're doing, but I think 99% of the people have no idea what's going on or why they're doing what they're doing. And I think that's what we need to start doing.
So are adults too late? Can we get to the adults?
No. I think that we can team up with our religious organizations, right?
Yeah.
We need to have them partnered in. We teach the Why'd You Stop Me program, the sheriff's office. We actually have it in Sacramento County, and they actually teach it to adults in our jails. So we do that in Sacramento County. So no, it's not. There are adults that have learned through the program. So.
And how about ride-along programs? Do you guys offer those, and is that something that's easily accessible, or is that too hard to do?
No, I think it's fairly easily accessible, and I think most agencies have them. And if they don't, then they should. It's a good education process. Everybody, I think it almost should be mandatory, but everybody should do one ride along. It would be an eye-opening experience.
I totally agree with that. I mean, I would sanction that. I would totally agree with that. I would totally fund that if we can get around to that. Let's get more into tactics, Kevin, if we could. What's your position on body cameras, and what's the funding like on body cameras? Just give me a little bit of a tutorial on how that's going and what you believe.
So the sheriff's office, we put in-car cameras in all of our vehicles back in 2006, 2007, I think it was. So we've had them for probably 13, 14 years now.
Long time, yeah.
We've had them a long time. I think we were one of the first in the region to have in-car cameras. We're in favor. The Deputy Sheriff's Association is in favor of in-car cameras, and we are not opposed to body cameras. In fact, our general order is already written. We've already approved it. We've wear tested a couple of different times the body cameras. It boils down to funding. The Board of Supervisors has not funded it. It's it's fairly easy to come up with the money on the front end for all of the hardware. Where the expense comes in is all of the storage of the data on the back end.
Oh, okay.
So it's a funding mechanism.
So I'd be uploaded to some cloud somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So that's on the supervisors then in terms of funding.
Well, I believe it is, right? But the board, if you talk to a couple of the Board of Supervisors, they'll throw it back on the sheriff and say, "Hey, the sheriff, we give him a budget. He can choose to do what he wants with the budget." Well, if I'm going to fund body cameras, but now I'm going to have to cut 10 positions to fund body cameras. So every city, every county could just take that away and say, "Hey, here we're going to fund it. You have to do it," and they can just do it.
Yeah, are you guys undermanned right now? Would you say in terms of what would you say in terms of you guys could use some help, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So go back to 2009. When we went through that whole layoff and rollback, we cut over 300 because the sheriff then, Sheriff Blanis, saw it coming. Well, actually, it was Sheriff McGinnis. We had over 300 vacancies. Those vacancies got cut, and then that wasn't enough. We had to lay off 122 warm bodies that got laid off. So we're down over 400 positions, 450 positions from what we had 11 years ago. And we've gotten a few of those back in the detective area, but we're nowhere near the staffing we were 11 years ago. Nowhere near it.
With a lot more requirements, I'm guessing now. So you guys are doing a lot more with a lot less.
Well, yeah. Well, that's that old adage, do more with less. Well, that's a fake term. You do less with less. It's just there's only so many hours in a day. And then when they cut the mental health and the homeless, the monies, who did they give that responsibility to? We have mental health teams and we have homeless outreach teams. So we've actually added responsibilities.
So if I was Santa Claus and I could give you whatever you needed right now today, what would you ask for? More people?
I think that everybody would just ask for support. Just recognize that you can't look at a half a dozen situations a year, right, that are bad situations. Nobody is saying that they're not. And then lump 800,000 law enforcement officers across this nation into that one teeny tiny small bucket. We are all happy. Everybody's happy going to work. If there's 50 calls pending when I log on, so be it. If there's 5 calls pending, log on, so be it. Just don't nitpick me and mother F me and call me a racist and the law enforcement is systemically racist.
Yeah.
That is what we've got to turn that narrative back to what the truth is and not this false narrative that's going around right now. That would be more than anything to everybody.
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel for you guys, Kevin. I really do, and I totally support that. And it really angers me to watch what's happening across the country as a guy that served for 20 years in the Air Force, and then my dad served 33 years in the Air Force, and I see what's happening to you guys, where, like we talked about earlier, 5 or 10 people cast this pall on an entire career field, not only a career field, but a legitimately God-sanctioned law enforcement, requirement that you guys are painted with that brush, and it pisses me off. I know it. I mean, I know it must piss you off, and I know it must piss all your other guys and girls off as well. And I think we're going to get back there. I do believe we're going to get back there where you guys and girls are held in esteem, and I will be there by your side. I guarantee you 100%. I get it, and I'm so sorry, not personally, but I'm sorry that the nation has done this to you, that the nation has done this to all of your peers, that we have allowed really poor leadership in Minneapolis, in Seattle, and Washington, D.C., to cast this, in Atlanta, Georgia, to cast this on you guys and girls. And I think that we'll get through this, and you guys will get through it. And I pray and I hope that that Americans will understand that 99.9999% of law enforcement officers are there for all the right reasons. You've got your handful. We've got our handful in the military as well, and we shouldn't let that kind of taint, that the mainstream media should not be allowed to taint that with you guys and color you guys with all the same broad brush. What we're watching right now across the nation with pulling down statues, and we're pulling down statues of people like U.S. Grant and Abraham Lincoln. I mean, my God, these were, if apparently we didn't do a really good job educating this generation, because those are the people who freed slaves and were the the quintessential people behind why we are free today. And to me, it's mind-boggling. And I really salute you, Kevin, and thank you very much for coming on tonight. If you have any questions for me, and I'm hoping I'm going to see you next week in Elk Grove.
Yeah, we're going to try to make it over there.
Yeah, I'd love to see you there, and you and Julie. And got any questions for me?
No, I don't. How's the polling look?
It's a toss-up right now, so we're looking really, really good.
Well, it's been a toss-up the last few elections. We just can't get across the finish line.
I think Bear is a little bit concerned. I think he's starting to throw some darts out there, and I think this is going to be the time we actually push him over and cross the finish line. So looking forward to your endorsement, hopefully, and looking forward to meeting you and talking to your folks as well. And let's make Sacramento County a better place to live, a safer place to live for all of our families, and make sure that people get the education they need and the memo they need about what you guys and girls do for a living, and stop all this foolishness.
Well, we'd be glad to have you.
Well, thank you so much. Looking forward to it, Kevin. Thanks so much. God bless you, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. Anytime.
Hey, Buzz. Buzz. Oh, Buzz left. Guys, thank you very much for tuning in. This is the Buzz Patterson Town Hall. I'm Ray Paris. I'm his communications director. Thank you guys very much for tuning in. Have a good one.